to participate in covert operations, to help run drugs to fund these operations, and to assassinate security risks. Mere bravado, or was McVeigh telling the truth?
The FBI had put wiretaps on the McVeigh family's phone after the bombing. So I'm reading this conversation back and forth between his mother and his sister. There's actually a few of these conversations where they say, we don't understand why the FBI won't listen to us and why the media is reporting that Timothy McVeigh washed out or dropped out of Special Forces. They're saying, no, we were told that he was still active in the military and that he was working on these covert missions.
Hey, it's Jose Galison. You're watching No Way Jose. You can find me on the No Way Jose YouTube channel, all the major audio podcasters, and Odyssey as well. That was an edit from my homie Tim Tuttle on Twitter, so definitely go check him out. Follow him if you want to see more of those. He likes to dig into the OKC stuff like I do as well. Drops a lot of cool edits. He's like I guess like a mix between me and Jinx, I guess you could say. Yeah, I mean, maybe that could be somebody else's. He's also known to take other ones and share it. It's not that he's taking credit or anything. But especially with somebody like Jinx, who's getting his count nuked all the time, it's good to preserve that shit. And he is a historian in that right for sure. But I do want to let you guys know the guest today is Mike Jackman of the Jackman Brothers. You guys may remember them. You might see them kind of switching out, for pee breaks on the Four Horsemen, since you can't tell them apart anyways. And I mean, we'll be just kind of shooting the bull, no specific topic, probably talking about conspiracy stuff. So that'll be fun. Do want to let you guys know how this whole works, the shindig. If you are watching on the 16th, then you are clearly a patron, because this is a live stream for patrons only. But this will get released roughly about a week or so later to the general public, to the peasants, if you will. Those who don't want to pay up. If not, that's cool. I'm just messing with you. I don't care. Although, obviously, I like money. But if you want to be able to support me that way, if you want to get live streams early, content early, I pretty much do that for most of my content, except for maybe rare occasions with, especially if it's like something current events or something. But I don't think I've ever even done that. But I always mention it just in case I do. I don't know. But for the only ones that really I don't do it with is the Four Pony Boys series, which I just did one with Daniel McAdams. So if you want to go check that out, it's already been out for a while by the time this comes out. But yeah, if you want to be able to support me, patreon.com, just No Way Jose 2020. The lowest level is $2, and that gives you the access to the early stuff. And then there's a 5, 10, and 20 with differing benefits to each. The 20 being my sponsors. My sponsors are Mikkel Thorpe of the Expat Money Show. I also have Jeremy, has an Etsy store at etsy.com/shop/raising-liberty. You can follow him on Twitter at Jeremy Rhymes. And I have my co-host, Toad from Tower Gang. You go follow him at Tower Gang Toad on Twitter, and definitely go subscribe to Tower Gang on YouTube, Rumble. You can check it out on Spotify. A lot of people like to do that. We get the most numbers on Spotify because we have video there as well. But yeah, definitely go check it out. We just had Dave Smith on. It was a really fun episode. But I will warn you, that is not this content like I do here. It's offensive comedy. So if you're offended, I don't care. I warned you. Also make sure to go check out TopLobsta.com. Use Jose at checkout for 10% off. If you saw me at Timcast, you saw I had that dope ass Terrence Yeeki didn't kill himself shirt. If I got to tell the world about it, it was definitely a special moment for me, and I appreciate you guys for it. But if you guys want that shirt, if you want to be able to spread that message as well, go to TopLobsta.com and you can go get it. I believe it's on the homepage, and it's also in my in the No Way Jose page as well. So highly suggest getting that. That way people are like, who the hell is this guy? And you can explain it to him. With that, let's go ahead and get Mike in here. What's up, dude?
Hey, how you doing, Jose?
Doing all right. Glad to have you on. I just figured we shoot the bull. It's kind of a last minute thing. I need an episode. I was like, I kind of got overwhelmed with all the stuff from it's almost like an abundance of options, and you're like, you know what? I just want to have a chill talk with a friendly acquaintance, somewhere between a friend and friendly acquaintance.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I figured we'd have a good conversation. We seem to have similar interests. Should be a fun time. I'm looking forward to it. First off, you want to tell everyone who you are, and then you can tell me if you appreciate the shout out you got on Tim Cass.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Mike Jackman, Eric Jackman's twin brother, like you said. Been made several appearances on the Four Horsemen. I was in the inaugural episode actually, so that's you can you know
It's like
when
Mary
we
Kate and Ashley, when you're like, you never know which is which. It could be either.
you can just swap us out. Yeah, like Mary Kate and Ashley, but I think Eric and I are a little bit more cuter. But that's
Yeah.
that's neither here nor there. Yeah, so I host Jackman Radio with my brother Eric, and we've been doing that since 2015, roughly. And yeah, I cover, like you said in your intro, a lot of politics. What people call conspiracies. Um, JFK assassination's been in my wheelhouse for probably close to 20 years. Been fascinated by that, since I was a teenager, really. Love to talk about foreign policy, anti-war stuff, current events. We cover all that, pop culture, because you got to have fun, man. You got to have some soma. You got to
Mhm.
mix some soma in there, man, with the
Yeah. That's what
with
Tower
the red
Game's for.
pills and the black pills. Yeah, you can't be a doom. What is it? A doom scroller or a what's the meme? A
Doom
doomer.
Poster, Doomer,
Yeah,
whatever.
or a
Yeah,
doomer.
Doomer.
You got
Yeah.
zoomers, boomers, and doomers, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, definitely when the Four Horsemen's revved up, or we're doing an episode and we're excited and the beers are flowing, there might be a pee break or two, and it's good to have a clone and a body double when you're doing that for sure, so the flow can just
Yeah.
just keep going.
Not
You know,
everyone's comfortable doing the cup trick like I do. So
or the bladder bag,
yeah, well,
but
if anyone's followed the old lore, I've admitted multiple times that I totally keep a piss cup nearby.
oh
There have
wow,
been multiple episodes I pissed, just so you guys know. That's how much I'm committed to it. I'm not gonna miss
that's
a beat.
commitment.
I have a weak bladder. You also can't see it, so it's kind of like, who cares? I'm just gonna pee in this cup and just kind of, oh wow, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you don't end up like that guy from CNN there during that meeting, where he was he was doing something extra on the side. He maybe hit a 900 number or webcam that he was doing, and he got Jeffrey Tubin, I think it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, dude, your episode on Timcast was awesome, man. You and Reed, I thought, killed it.
Yeah.
Your Terrence Yeeky bit, man, was that's all you can hope for when you get a big platform like that. You want to put forward an issue that you really care about and that really moves you. And I've always said your Oklahoma City series, man, is the best that's come down the pike in a long time, and it's almost like a companion piece to Noble Lie. And
Mm.
no, I really appreciate you guys shouting us out, man. That was huge.
Yeah, it was
That
completely
was
organic.
huge.
There was no like me and Reed came in with some things we did want to hit, but it's also like the nature of what Tim Pool's show is. You just kind of like do what you can. But like so far as plugs, like at least in the show, like the names of the people we shouted out and stuff, really that was just kind of off the dome stuff that like was not at all intentional. So I mean, I guess you could compliment us, but it really was like we kind of don't deserve it. It was just natural what we thought of at the moment. It wasn't a but yeah, I mean, shit, I forgot like I think half my plugs at the end. I was supposed to shout out we were having Dave Smith on Tower Gang. I was supposed to shout out to I feel the one I actually really feel bad about is I didn't shout out TopLobsta because he does a lot of work for me and I really appreciate the guy and he made that shirt and I also do want that shirt to sell, which actually it's funny. I got someone gave me crap about like, oh, you're trying to profit off this poor guy, and I was like, well, one, it's like raising awareness. Two, it's like I mean I didn't really comment to the guy, but it's like you don't even know the financial situation. Like I'm pretty sure technically the setup I have with Top, and this is how it usually works for a lot of merch people, you usually get a percentage, but I've literally never asked Top for any of it because I just like, I don't care. And it's also like, because I don't know, he does so much for me anyways, whatever, you can have the 10% or whatever you told me I get. I don't
Right.
care. Like,
Well, I mean, you're drawing attention to someone who is suicided. That's the
yeah.
bottom line. And there's so many figures in modern political theater and events and that happen that just get lost to history and you never hear about them again. And but certainly their families, their children, they live on and they carry that every day. So I think that was a beautiful tribute. And man, the Oklahoma City stuff, like the intro there you showed, man, you ever see Arlington Road?
I have not. No, it was
Oh,
a
that's a
song
movie you got to
documentary
see.
movie. Okay.
Yeah, it's a movie with Tim Robbins and Jeff Bridges, and it's Chris, a really creepy movie. It came out in like probably like 97, 98, and it's about a domestic terror plot and a guy moves in next door to a family, and you know, the family is becomes friends with him, and then the husband starts to suspect that he might be part of some kind of like Timothy McVeigh-esque group. And no, I don't want to give you the whole thing away, but I think given your interest in Oklahoma City, I think you would really enjoy that movie.
Yeah, I'll
It's
definitely have to check it out.
it's
Have you
worth
watched the whole
watching.
series? You can tell me if you haven't. I'm just curious.
I honestly, you've done 7 parts.
7, I think. I want to say 7 in a bonus episode.
I think I watched the whole Yiki or most of it, and I watched a couple others. I haven't watched the whole
Okay.
thing, man. It's I
No, you're good. I get it.
I'll,
Not every
I'll
you got shit to do, so I don't expect anyone
yeah.
to.
Well, what I do
Yeah,
is I have intentions. I'm like, okay, I did watch most of the you guys with McAdams. That was great.
yeah.
He the shirt t-shirt he was wearing, it de-aged him by at least 15 or 20 years.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
with the cool kids now.
yeah, no, it's cool having him for sure. It was definitely wild. It is like it's just funny because he is just like all the guys there. We identify with him in a certain way, and it's funny that like he's like, oh, the cool kids, and it's like, well, we think like what we like about you is because we see that gleam of cool kid in there every now and
Oh
then when
yeah.
you
Oh,
get enraged.
McBased is everything, dude. We all see ourselves in McBased.
Yeah.
I hope I can can be that based if I make it to my 50s.
Yeah, no,
You
he's
know.
awesome. I love him. He's a great guy. He's I know he's funny. I mean, I think he probably puts on a little bit of a more professionalism when he gives like appearances like that. I think maybe I got a little bit more of a dressed down version of him, so that was cool.
Yeah.
But
No, that
yeah,
was great to see him in that setting, and yeah, I mean, he's like you said, he's Ron Paul's right hand man, and he's the guy.
yeah,
So yeah, when he's doing the Ron Paul Liberty Report, he's got to be a little bit, he's got to be professional and a little bit more buttoned up. But
yeah,
yeah, no, he's actually going to be at the Rage Against the War Machine March this weekend with Eric and Reed. So man, that's going to be quite an event.
yeah. That'll be great. I think that means definitely sounds. I mean, there's definitely a lot of stuff going on there for sure. I mean, I hope it's a good show. I hope it's a lot of good speeches. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really like a hoorah like rally guy. I'm not against it. I don't know. Have fun, I guess. I don't know. Uh, I'm neither. I'm more like ambivalent. But like I'm kind of. I don't know. How much really comes out of this stuff? I don't know. I'm not saying like I'm against it or for it. I just, I don't know.
I get what you're saying.
But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure people show up. They get good speeches. They a lot of cool stuff. I mean, in that sense, it'll probably be great for sure. So, although I mean, there's been a whole lot of hullabaloo over the whole thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, it feels like probably the biggest anti-war event since the Iraq War, 20
Mm,
years ago. So, of course, the powers that be are going to do what they can to stifle it or stop it or, undermine it and criticize it and make it look insignificant. But I think it is significant when you look at the roster of speakers. Everyone from
mhm.
McBase to Ron Paul, Roger Waters, I think, is sending in a video. Tulsi Gabbard will be there. Jimmy Dore. So there's a good cross selection of people who are united, on the anti-war platform. So
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy, man. The inversion in our country with foreign policy and the wars, man. It's just not popular.
Yeah.
To be anti-war, especially now. It's crazy.
Yeah, so I asked about the OKC thing, how much you watched, because I didn't know if you caught what was going on in that. Like, if you've watched the whole series, you would probably pick up some of the context. And maybe we've talked about before, maybe you've heard this, but probably my second favorite, and I guess favorite's kind of a perverse word to use for it because it's such a tragedy, but I guess favorite in the sense of like most intriguing angle of the OKC, for me, was that angle being expressed in that edit. The first being Yiki, of course, because like he is, in my opinion, probably one of the most obvious like suicides or murders that was ruled as suicide that I've ever seen. And then you add on to the aspect of what a sympathetic character he was, that he was legitimately trying to do the right thing, all that, and the fact he had kids makes it that much worse. So I think it's like a great hook to bring people in, and it's also like a good there's also like I have no problem saying like there's some stuff in the OKC thing that I kind of have to caveat with like, okay, well, we don't know this 100%. We don't know this 100%. I can tell you 100% Terrence Yiki was murdered. And I can tell you with 99.999% that the government was involved to some degree. Now, it may have just been the local PD, or not the local, because a lot of people don't realize when he was murdered, actually his PD, it wasn't even their jurisdiction, but they immediately took over, even though they had there was no justification for it whatsoever. They just did, which is like one of the suspicious things about it. but they took over, and there's no way that that went down, got ruled as suicide. All the craziness when you start digging into it, no way that could happen without some sort of corruption, at least at the police level. I think the feds were probably involved as well. I think that's very likely. But anyways, the second angle is the fact that it's alluded to. There's multiple things that seem to suggest that McVeigh may have been a legitimate asset. Because what happened is, I believe this was corroborated by his sister, which that may have been who was in there. I believe there were letters or stuff that are used as sources. And I want to say, I don't know if it was to one of his defense attorneys or what, but I believe because when he first got picked up after it, he was saying a lot of crazy, basically singing, like saying everything. And then later his story became the official narrative, which is weird. But, it's kind of like, well, maybe he just fell in line. Someone got to him and was like, hey, man, let me tell you what's going to happen or whatever. There's a million different ways they can control things. But supposedly he was in the military. The story is that he told, I don't know if it was other inmates or if it was his defense attorney, but I know for a fact there was something to his sister. He essentially said that he when he was in the military, he went to go to like special forces training. And the official story is that his foot was hurting him from like being in the field from before, and he wasn't able to continue on. And so he washed out. But his story, what he said to his sister, and I believe one or two other people at least, like legit sources, is that they essentially brought him into some sort of black ops thing. They said, hey, due to whatever things, whatever, psychological profiles, we feel like you fit well for this, and you'll basically be taken off the books. It'll look like you're out of the military, but we'll have you doing shit for us. And I mean, if you look at the McVeigh from that lens and a lot of the crazy stuff he did, and you follow his story, it clicks. So I mean, there are sources, but I do try to caveat that it's like not 100%. There's no smoking gun, because obviously, there might be one day Jesse Trendu's in court working on it. He might get something, but when someone probably goes off books, they're probably literally off books, and there's no record. So
Right.
That's one of those things they're probably never really going to be able to confirm one way or the other, like 100%. I mean, for me, it's like I generally, I guess I kind of believe it. That's kind of my thought, but I don't assert it in that like I could prove it.
Yeah, right. It makes the
So,
most sense to you though, and I've
yeah.
always kind of wondered too, and I'm pretty sure the footage exists and it's out there somewhere. Who was John Doe number two, or the second person to
Mm.
get out of the truck with him? Or the other person on the footage. Um, Even Dana Rohrabacher, the former congressman, is thought there was a conspiracy. He may have tried to link it to some kind of Middle Eastern thing, or suspects, but
Yeah, that is like a smaller angle, which has very weak evidence to support it, I guess, but it's kind of sort of circumstantial. The main connection there, I believe, there might be other connections people make, but Terry Nichols, the official accomplice, the only other accomplice that really got indicted,
he's
he
in
filed
jail,
for,
right? He's still in jail,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
jail. Indicted is the right word. That's when you go to jail, right? Or
Yeah, he
yeah,
was he
yeah,
was
okay.
indicted. He was convicted.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Convicted, indicted, whatever. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Legal
Yeah.
terms.
It's a ham sandwich.
But he took a lot of weird trips to the Philippines, and that's where I forget the name of the Haji guy. It was the dude, the one did the 93 world bombing. I believe he was kind of
Oh, you
staged out of the
Ramsey
Philippines.
Youssef?
Yeah, so there's a lot of people think
Right.
all of Nichols' extensive trips to there were because of that reason, but he kind of had a sort of excuse, although he definitely was at some point probably meeting up with shady actors. But his
He
wife,
was
he had a
doing
mail
sex
order bride.
tourism. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, his mail order bride was from over there, so a
Oh,
lot of times there was periods where he was literally visiting her, and then she came back to the States, and there was visiting family. But there were times where there was no reason for it, and he was just going over there. So I don't know. Maybe he was meeting up with them, but it's a lot of people will run with that. It's kind of like they're running off of weak evidence, and it's like there's so much like hard evidence. I mean, it's a fun angle to entertain, but even then, to what extent would they really plan? They I don't know, helped with explosive materials. I don't know. How much could they really support from
S-
over
s-
there?
So even if McVeigh was an asset, do you still believe that he was he was guilty, and he believed he turned, or he actually had these radical ideas, and of course anti-government ideas, but enough of those ideas to do something violent? Or do you
Like,
think he was
do I
trying to
think is it?
infiltrate the plot, or do you think he was?
If I'm going with the angle that he was an asset,
Yeah.
I don't know to what extent he actually ideologically fell in line with the people that he was with, because a lot of people, this is one of the common points, is there was a bunch of accomplices. He was basically, I don't know if he was technically part of the ARA, the Aryan Resistance something. I forget what the last A stands for, but some like basically neo-Nazi group. And he was like kind of in cahoots with them. I don't know if he was officially a member, but he hung out with them a lot in like Elohim City. There's
Elohim, yeah.
there's multiple other characters that were part of that group, or so sort of loosely associated, that were, almost extremely clearly accomplices in some way. But I don't know. I mean, like, he could have been like, it is kind of like hard. Like, I don't know. It could have been completely all a front. He could have believed, like, it could have been one of those things where, like, yes, he did work for the feds, but he also believed it, which made it easy. I don't know. It's kind of like, I don't know what his mind was at. At the end of the day, though, I feel like he was likely, he was part of PatCon, which is essentially the right wing's version of like COINTELPRO, which they were infiltrating right wing movements. And PatCon is something that's basically been confirmed. It's not something that's had as much stuff released as a lot of other things like COINTELPRO or MK Ultra or stuff like that. A lot less documents, but it's basically confirmed. It's pretty much confirmed from, I want to say some of that stuff is stuff Jesse Trinidad got out of court. But yeah, so PatCon was that. And, funny enough, that's kind of what, whenever McVeigh got picked up, he did say that, and he was essentially basically describing PatCon. And then later, much later after the fact, I don't remember when the releases were, probably like maybe a decade or so. I'm talking my ass a little bit out of here, but I know it was well after the bombing that we did find out PatCon was a real thing. So it was like, oh, This thing he was describing, not so crazy. But when you're in 95 and you hear that, you're like, what the fuck is he talking about?
Well, I mean, it's even, even if you go back to the Kennedy assassination and Lee Harvey Oswald, he was, there's a lot of research to suggest that he was a false defector to the Soviet Union
Yep.
when he went over there in 1959 with the Marines. And, he goes over to the Soviet Union and supposedly tells them that he's got information about the U-2 spy plane, and he's got, military secrets he wants to share. But the Russians are like, I don't know if we actually trust this guy. He could very well be a double agent or military, some kind of false, defector program, because they knew about that. We were sending all kinds of people over there to do that, and of course they were trying to do it to us. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, correlation, that Oswald, the Senator Richard Schweiker from the House Select Committee, which was the second investigation into the assassination, said that everywhere you look with Oswald, there's fingerprints of intelligence.
Yep.
So,
And with these characters, it's like you can never like confirm it, because that's kind of the nature of what they do or are. But it is like, this is why I like the term glowy, because it works. It's like, you can say a good way to describe what you're saying is they glow.
they glow.
And it's like, you're not
Yeah.
saying 100% that's a fed. You're saying they glow. Like, I mean, it might be a light glow, it might be a really, really bright glow, but they're glowing. They're putting off some signs.
Well, it's interesting too. 3 weeks before Kennedy was killed, November 2nd, 1963, there was a Chicago plot uncovered to assassinate Kennedy, and former Secret Service agent Abraham Bolden. I don't know if you're familiar with him or his story at all. Kind of a guy like Iki. I mean, he's still alive. It's amazing he survived, but his story is, he was persecuted and they locked him up and trumped up some false bribery charges against him, and eventually got him committed to an insane asylum and pretty much tortured him. He was the first African American on the presidential security detail for Kennedy. JFK called him the Jackie Robinson of the Secret Service. I had him on my podcast actually a few years back, and he's got a great book out. And actually, Brandon pardoned him last year, if you can believe that. April of last year, he was finally pardoned. So that shows you there are good people on the inside. They say, oh, somebody would have talked, or if somebody knew something or found out something, they would have talked. Well, plenty of people did. Look what happened to them. They got their lives destroyed. He essentially got set up and framed for, something he didn't do, and it totally ruined his career and his life. But back to the plot in Chicago, 3 weeks before Kennedy's killed, there's a former Marine named Thomas Arthur Valley who's picked up by the authorities. He doesn't have any guns on him, but he has hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and he had been heard making very, virulent anti-Kennedy remarks. He was also stationed in Japan, just like Lee Harvey Oswald. Very similar profile. Was part of the John Birch Society. Of course, Oswald was supposedly a member of the Fair Play for Cuba committee. I don't know if you've seen the famous footage or pictures of Oswald on the street handing out those flyers, which is supposedly a pro Castro, a Cuban Castro sympathizing group. Even though in New Orleans, when Oswald was there, there was only one member of the group in that chapter, and that was him. And he was, making flyers at an address that was shared by a former FBI guy named Guy Bannister, who was also connected to John Birch. So it's funny, even back in the 60s, you had these groups that were being infiltrated, by the government and looked at and basically used and manipulated to create a narrative and a legend, which is what they did for Oswald. Because once Oswald is arrested, the very first story in the mainstream media to depict him as a crazy pro Castro, communist, was connected to his time with the Fair Play for Cuba, which was funded by a CIA agent down there, by the name of not David Atlee Phillips, who also went by Maurice Bishop. He was connected to that, and then there was another CIA guy. Um, uh, he was always hunting for the mole. Sorry, it's been a long day. I'm trying to remember his name,
No,
but
yeah, no. When you
bas-
dropping names, that's why I tend to try to say with vagaries as opposed to specific facts, because those are way harder to remember. When someone can spit facts, you're like, all right, they know their shit.
yeah, but the point is there was a CIA agent who was funding this anti-Castro student group in New Orleans, and he was involved with them, and they were causing a scene. Oswald gets on TV at one point to talk about how he's a Leninist and all this weird stuff.
It's a big old
And
flaming comment, yeah.
yeah, it's almost like they want to have like a evidence in a paper trail for that.
Yeah.
And
It's almost like when McVeigh showed up at Waco.
did he really?
Yeah, he was. There's photos of him at Waco. He was at Waco, clearly upset by it. Yeah, I mean,
Well, isn't that
yeah.
what they say the official reason is for the bombing? He was
Yeah,
upset about.
basically, yeah, but yeah, he had maybe he was at Ruby Ridge too. I don't know that for certain. I know, I'm like 99% certain he was at Waco. I'm like 49% he was at he was at Ruby Ridge as well, but I might be wrong.
It's like with Oswald, there's never really been an actual official motive or reason given for why he would have killed Kennedy. Actually, there's evidence that he liked Kennedy. He respected him and admired him. He had a photo of him in hanging up in his house, and was never heard saying anything disparaging about him. So there's so much about it that just doesn't make any sense. And if he was this psychopath, egotistical, lone nut, when he has all the world's cameras on him, why does he deny that he did it the whole time? Why wouldn't he take credit and bask in it, right, and
Yeah,
revel in it? He maintained his innocence up until he was killed.
yeah, wild. I got one of the dudes showed up. Eddie usually shows up for these. When do you think the government started infiltrating groups they didn't like? For eternity, basically. I don't know.
When
Do you
did the
think?
government form?
Yeah.
What was the first what was the first meeting of Quakers who were against war?
Yeah.
I mean, they infiltrate the freaking Quakers, man. So
Yeah.
of course they're going to infiltrate these right wing groups in the '90s and nowadays. I mean, it's cartoonish nowadays,
Yeah.
really. Like you did great work with the Whitmere plot and
Mhm.
Brendan Caserta, and I mean, it's cartoonish. Like
Yeah.
it's the meme. It's all the Spider-Men pointing at each other, and they're all FBI.
Yeah, it takes them a
It's,
while for their tactics to change, and there's something I think we'll probably talk about a little bit later that I do think their tactics may be changing. I think it takes them, they kind of lag. That's the difference between the free market and the state is the free market's way more innovative, so they're ahead of it. Typically, but the state takes a while to catch up. They keep the same blueprint, but they're like they kind of modernize as they go, but they kind of like they always lag. Like with like the Michigan one, it was like it was so fucked up. They're so clunky, and it's like, yeah, it is funny how this works out. It's just, yeah, I don't know. I had a point, but I completely zoned out.
yeah, no, I mean, they move the plot along to a certain point, and they prod it, and they they push it, man. They move the ball up the court, and all it takes is a young disaffected or demoralized individual, or someone who wants to belong to something, or someone who has mental illness, I mean, that there's a great documentary called The Power of Nightmares. I think Richard Curtis did it, or a British guy. I forget his name, but it's a really good documentary, and they talk about all these terror plots that were 100% concocted by the FBI, like from the purchase of materials to holding the hands of these people, getting them up to a point where they're going to do it, and thinking that they're part of a terrorist group, and it's
Yep.
actually just the feds.
Yep. Terror
So
Factory by Trevor Aaronson's that covers that as well. I mean, I haven't read
yeah,
that one you mentioned, but
and then it
yeah,
just justifies their budgets the next year to
yeah,
go higher and higher. It's
yeah.
really what ends up happening, and there's more surveillance, and the thing's just Leviathan.
Yeah,
It's
and the,
just
the the funny thing though is like you brought up the Michigan thing earlier. The thing that really pissed me off and got me a lot of stain and kind of like why is this not bigger about the Michigan one was like, all right, typically how this works with like what you were mentioning and kind of like with the book that I read, Trevor Aronson, he's kind of going to like how informants work, and then also like I think the main point of that one is kind of like how informants work generally speaking, but yeah, they also is kind of going into how they prey upon people. They usually find them like when they're down on their luck, typically people who are like anti-government or anti some whatever thing they're trying to go after. And then they like completely poke and prod them ideologically. They'll be like, hey, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. They basically give them everything they need to do it. But then usually how it works, it's almost like this thing where like, but then the person tries to do it. It might be like a fake bomb or they bust them before they even do it and they already have evidence. But the person generally usually is like, I mean, this is not 100%. Don't get me wrong. There's other occasions where it doesn't happen, and then they get him up for something else. I remember there was one sad story in the book where there was somebody like that where he didn't even go through with it, and then they just fucked him for something else, and then tried to use the stuff he said during that period with the informant to kind of railroad him. It was a whole to do. I forget the specifics, but it is. God, fuck, I forgot my point. I'm fucking spacey today. But God, what was I even fucking talking about?
you got a Tim Pool hangover. You're still
Yeah,
hungover from Tim
yeah,
Pool's
so
beanie.
tired.
It's
Yeah,
just
I've
it's the power of the beanie, Jose.
but how the informants work and how they prey on these people. Oh, I remember my point. And the idea was that I was getting at was that like usually, typically, they actually carry it out. Whereas like with the Michigan one, they didn't even carry it out. So it's like, don't get me wrong, I think it's fucked up to do that in the first place. Take someone and completely manipulate them to do something illegal and do literally everything for them to be able to make them be able to do it. But at least there's like almost an argument to be like, but they did it and that was still wrong. So like, because
Right.
like you can understand that like if you were someone and someone just handed you a bomb and said, hey, go blow up this school, here's your plans, here's your getaway, here's everything. If you did it, it's still wrong. So you're like, okay, all right, like yeah, I'm not like
Yeah, you're still involved, and you still
yeah,
had intent, and
yeah.
you
So
carried it out.
like it's kind of fucked up that they did all that and they kind of like concocted it and they're like kind of making more problems than they're really doing anything about. But all right, they were gonna do it, so all right, there's something there. But when they don't even do it, like with the Michigan one, it's like what the fuck? Like it was like they didn't even come close to doing it. It's just
Right.
the most contrived bullshit there ever was, really.
And the original idea for it, wasn't it just suggested by one of the actual feds or one of the informants?
Basically, everything was suggested by
It's
them, and then
nuts.
everyone was just kind of like, no, like if anything, they're almost like, what? No, like what are you? Was this some Fed shit?
And then they want to paint anybody who has similar ideology or travels in those circles. They want to paint them all with the same brush, and they
Yeah.
they really, unfortunately, that those type of tactics are still pretty effective. You know.
So, anyways, I wanted to talk a little bit about JFK stuff, and particularly Jack Ruby. It's a little bit cheating because I'm probably going to try to do another JFK series here soon, and I just kind of want to dig your brain into Jack Ruby because I don't know a ton about him. I know there's a lot of weird fucky shit about him. For one, obviously that fact that he then killed Oswald, just for seemingly no reason. And then also, I find it very weird that he then shortly, what, like 4 years or so later, dies of cancer. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, I haven't looked into it.
67, I think.
Yeah, like I haven't looked into it enough to see like, because I mean, I don't know. I guess if someone was regularly going to the hospital and actually had cancer, you could like, actually document it. But I feel like in the 60s, if you were in prison, they probably could just like paper that over and make it look like you had cancer and oh, you just died. I don't know. The government's on way worse shit. So I don't know. I just also feel
Yeah.
weird. For all I know, they have a cancer machine out there. I don't know that too.
Who knows, man? Maybe they have the cure for cancer. I've lost several relatives to it, and just going through that experience and just seeing the for-profit nature of it, they think of how much money they would lose if there was a cure, and people got better from it. And that weren't, in the system. But yeah, Ruby's an interesting case. I mean, when he was on TV and then taken in, according to Roger Stone, Richard Nixon said to him, "Oh, I recognize him. I worked with him back in the day." Ruby was involved with mafioso type stuff. He was involved with gun running. With he had his nightclub there, the Carousel Club in Dallas, where a lot of the police officers were chummy with him. They would come in and he'll comp their drinks and hook them up with a date or whatever. And yeah, I mean it's interesting. He ends up in the basement of the police department there in the garage to shoot Oswald. I mean, you would think that they would have had that locked down, but because of the relationship he had with the police, and they were like, oh, it's just Jack, and yeah, he can be in here, that's fine. I mean, he was even at a press conference, that famous press conference that Oswald did, the short and sweet one that he called it, where you see him, he looks beaten up and bruised, and he's he's essentially begging and pleading for legal assistance and someone to come forward to represent him. And there's a famous photo where you can see Jack Ruby in the background, basically like stalking him. I think basically Ruby had to kill Oswald by the end of that weekend. He couldn't let him live to Monday. There could be no trial. And officially he said, oh, I wanted to spare Jackie Kennedy the humiliation and degradation of having to come back here and have a trial with
Yeah.
Oswald. And
I
he did
think,
it
yeah.
he did it because he felt bad, and he was trying to just be a good American
which he
and
was
kill the guy who killed Kennedy.
which he was like an extremely seedy, like criminal underground
Yeah,
character that ran a strip club. So I just struggle. Like, I don't know. I guess you could be someone who runs a strip club and be a reputable
sure.
person and actually genuinely care about the first lady's feelings to that extent. But I don't know. I just generally
Oh, we
think
don't
that
buy that.
person. Yeah, I mean that's a little. I
Well,
don't
there's
know.
there's one witness, and she's featured in the JFK movie briefly. I think under a different name, because Oliver Stone had to change some of the people's real names for legal reasons. But her name is Julianne Mercer, and she testified to the Warren Commission to this information, that she was driving on Elm Street the day of the assassination earlier in the day, and she saw a truck pulled over on the curb, this green truck, and she saw Jack Ruby getting out of the truck and another man, and she saw like a bundle that looked like could be a gun or some kind of weapon. And she said, clear as day, this is what I saw. She told the authorities this is what she reported to the Warren Commission. And then she looked at it some years later, where it was notarized and had her signature for her statement. And she said, well, first of all, I didn't sign this, and this is not my signature. So they changed what she said, and then they added a different signature to it, and that's what ended up in the Warren Commission. And you see that being done so many times with witness statements. You see witness statements not even in the Warren Commission. You see people who were witnesses that weren't even interviewed, like Aquila Clemens, who lived right near where Officer J.D. Tippit was shot. Shortly after Kennedy, and that's originally what Oswald was picked up for. He was picked up for the shooting of Officer Tippit, and there's a whole bunch of irregularities with that story. What's interesting is where Tippit was killed, it was actually not far from an apartment that Jack Ruby had. And there's some people who think that Ruby was actually involved in the Tippit shooting, or there with someone else. And some of the witnesses identified a stocky fellow running away from that scene. Whereas officially, Oswald was walking down the street. Tippit pulled up to him. Oswald went to talk to him, in the passenger side window, and then pulls his gun out and shoots him. And then, walks out onto the street after Tippit stumbles out of the car and shoots him in the head.
Yeah, and you definitely wouldn't
Um,
describe Oswald as a stocky fella. He was a lanky guy. He might have been
yeah, he was
short, but
he was little. Yeah,
skinny.
24 years old, probably 5'8", maybe 5'9", receding hairline. And yet you have that witness Aquila Clemens, who saw two men fleeing. One of them was stocky, who resembled Jack Ruby. You have another witness who was in a truck parked on the street, who saw something very similar, two men. But officially it's just Oswald, and the police aren't there responding to the scene for some time afterwards. But there's other witnesses who saw a police car that was there. So there's all kinds of weird stuff with Officer Tippit, and the possibility that he knew Ruby ahead of time. There's all kinds of eyewitness statements about Oswald and Ruby being seen together. So Yeah, Ruby was very shady. He was very shady, and he was involved with the mafia. And of course, I think you touched on this in one of your Kennedy episodes. When he was being evaluated for trial, he was visited by none other than the CIA mind control doctor, Jolly West,
Yep.
which was uncovered, I think, fairly recently by Tom O'Neill for his book Chaos.
Yep.
And
It's a good book. I
that's a
read that. Yeah.
bomb. Yeah, that's a great book. That's a
Yeah.
bombshell revelation, man.
Yeah.
Like out of all the doctors and previous ones, court issued ones said, "Oh no, he's competent. Yeah, he's good. I did the eval on him, and he's not crazy." And but it was Jolly West who went in there, and I just pictured that scene from Batman Begins with the Scarecrow mask, just freaking out the guy in the interrogation room, and
Yeah.
who knows what he did to him? If he poisoned
Yeah.
him, or if he, we don't know. I mean, now what we know now about Jolly West, I wouldn't be surprised about any of that.
Yeah, Jolly West. He also plays a part in OKC. I don't know if I ever told you this or you got to that part of the series, but he
I don't think so.
he was. I want to say he was like a trauma counselor or something for the people in OKC, like the
Wow.
some of the witnesses or the victims or whatever. And also, I don't think he ever met with McVeigh, or at least not that was documented that we know of. But his protege, or one of his proteges, I don't remember the guy's name. I wish I could remember it right now. It's in the series. If you go, it's something.
One of
Booth,
Jolly West's
one of Jolly
proteges.
West's proteges, one of his underlings, someone who was also kind of closely associated with it. I can't remember his name. Maybe it'll come to me later. It doesn't really matter.
It's
But
not Dr.
he,
Gottlieb, Sidney Gottlieb, is
no,
it?
it's not Gottlieb. No, Gottlieb
Okay.
was like his. I believe Gottlieb was kind of over Jolly West, but Jolly West kind of became the one more notorious kind of.
I
You
read
know,
Poisoner in Chief about Gottlieb, which is by
yep,
Stephen
I did
Kinzer.
that one too. Yep,
Great
good
book.
book. Yeah,
Yeah.
good
Sorry, but
book.
yeah,
Yeah.
you were saying so. Jolly West was a grief counselor for OKC people.
Yes, and then also the one of his proteges, I can't remember the guy's name. One of his kind of like people loosely associated with him was actually documented to be meeting with McVeigh. Kind of like for I don't know what reasons they gave. Psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever the hell. But he was meeting with him as well. I would, if I remember correctly, that was somewhere along the time where all of a sudden, ta-da! Fucking McVeigh started, instead of singing all the stuff he was before, oh, you know what? I'm here with the official narrative. So I don't know, maybe some crazy MK Ultra stuff, maybe as simple as, hey man, we're going to get you out of here. Because that's another thing he told people in his cells that I don't know if at least one, if maybe multiple people that he was gonna live, that they were gonna fake his death or they were gonna get him out of there or whatever. Which I don't
Yeah,
necessarily believe that happened. I think there's a good chance maybe he was told that by handlers or something.
possibly. Yeah, Corbett did it. Corbett, I think, alluded to that.
Yeah.
James Corbett did a great piece on OKC, and I think that's either his piece or is it the end of No Bull Lie where they kind of say it's possible that they put the shade down and they injected him and then just took the body out, but they
Yeah.
think maybe
I
it's
think there was
possible
like
that they snuck him out or
I think what they used to support that is I believe there was one eyewitness who I think was watching it on like a CCTV type thing, said that it looked like he was still breathing. So I don't know. So I mean that's really weak, but I mean it's a lot of
yeah.
people like to go on that and have fun with it. I don't know. I mean I wouldn't be
That's
surprised.
more of
Yeah.
in the realm of speculation. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean it's
I
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either way. I think he was probably killed. That's my guess. I mean, loose ends.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
back to Ruby, back to Jack Ruby. I don't know if you've seen this clip, but there's a clip of him sitting there with his lawyer, being asked a couple of questions. It's a black and white clip, and they say, were there powerful forces involved in the assassination? Beyond was there a plot? And he said, yes, these are very powerful forces and powerful people, and the full truth and my role in it, I can't say, but it will come out. And he requested to go to Washington D.C. to testify and not stay in Dallas, which they refused to do. And the one mainstream reporter at the time, her name was Dorothy Kilgallen. She was the only one that was able to get an interview, exclusive interview with Jack Ruby, and actually sit down with him and do conduct research and ask questions and be really thorough with notes and everything. And she was writing a book about it, and she had these sessions with Ruby, and she said, I'm going to crack the case wide open. And then she ends up dead, and all her notes went missing.
No way.
And dude, the Dorothy Kilgallen story will blow your mind because
Yeah.
like the show Hollywood Squares.
Yeah.
They have like the celebrities and certain people of the week who are participating. So she was part of a show like that back in the '60s. I forget what it was called. It wasn't Laughing. It was a very popular like current events comedy game show political type thing that she was part of, and she was a very well respected journalist. She was very talented. She was a great writer. She was of that scene, and uh, she was found at her house in her guest room, lying upright in her bed in the guest room, reading with a book on her, and it was a book she had already read. And they ruled it a suicide or an accidental overdose. But there's a book that's come out fairly recently where there's evidence to suggest that she was poisoned. They said, "Oh, this was barbiturates, and this was an overdose or a possible suicide." And it seems more likely that somebody during dinner put something in her drink and poisoned her. And then her
Hmm.
notes disappeared as well.
Yeah,
And
it's weird. It
she
reminds
would,
me of I believe I want to say there might be some OKC out here there that says what the fuck, you got this wrong. I want to say it was Fortier, Michael Fortier. I might be wrong, but nonetheless, one of the likely accomplices of McVeigh, one of the many likely ones. Maybe it was Fortier. I might be wrong in the name, so don't get mad at me, OKC guys out there. But one of them, I think Michael Fortier. He got sent to prison shortly after. I don't believe it was even anything associated with McVeigh. I believe it was criminal activities what the ARA was doing that got him booked up. And he kind of loudly was saying that that he was writing a book and he was going to talk to like journalists. And I believe I want to say at a date in court or something. And he was kind of loudly being like, yeah, I'm going to kind of blow the world's mind kind of deal. And like, and boop, he died in a cell, kind of in an Epstein type style,
really,
kind of hung himself. Yep. I mean, don't get me wrong, he could have legitimately killed himself, but according to, I want to say it was his family or somebody said that, he was in good spirits, everything didn't make sense, which, I mean, I don't know. I guess that still can mean he killed himself. I don't know. It's also just the timings, like pretty convenient, but it's also like he I mean, he could just kill himself. I mean, this is where there's a lot of times with these type things. This is why people like criticize like conspiracy theorists for bringing up stuff like this. And I do think it's important to like caveat somewhat. Like it doesn't
yeah,
mean for sure, but let's be real. If we start adding things together and you start noticing patterns, it's like, I
yeah.
mean, a conglomeration of things. You're like, all
There's
right, this is weird.
there's some real blatant ones with the Kennedy assassination, and
Yeah.
Richard Belzer or Belzner, the actor there, has a great book called Kill List, and he details Dorothy Kilgallen, who I was just telling you about. And then there's S.M. Holland, who was on the triple overpass where the car came over, and he clearly saw some kind of smoke coming from the grassy knoll. I'm pretty sure he ends up having a mysterious death. And there's Lee Bowers, who overlooked the railroad tracks that was kind of behind the picket fence, saw several cars coming in the area even after the authorities had supposedly shut it down to traffic and cars coming in. He saw 2 or 3 cars, late '50s models, coming in, and just strange looking men back there. And something caught his attention at the time of the shooting near the fence, and he was pretty sure it was a shot. And he ends up dead a couple years later in a single car crash, which had some weird circumstances. And then there's George de Mohrenschildt, who was like Oswald's babysitter. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all, but he was part of the white Russian community down in Texas. And he's this wealthy oil guy. He's a geologist, and he just so happens to befriend Oswald, who has no money. Like, what's this older wealthy guy doing? Hanging out with Lee Harvey Oswald, who has no money. Is not part of his social class, and he befriends him, and kind of guides him. And it later emerged that he was told by a CIA guy in Texas named J. Walton Moore to essentially hand Oswald off to Ruth and Michael Payne, the Paynes, which is where Oswald's wife was living with Ruth Payne, and she's actually still alive. And there's a great documentary that came out about her by a guy named Max Good, which I highly recommend checking out. But de Mohrenschildt was called to testify in the '70s for the House Select Committee that came out in '78. And just before he could go to testify, he ends up dead, gunshot wound. Ruled a suicide, but definitely could have been a murder. So that's That's another witness to look into, and he was actually connected to George H.W. Bush, Bush Sr., who was, of course, the head of the CIA. And DeMornshall writes a personal letter to Bush, pleading for help, saying, "Hey, I'm in a bind here with this Oswald situation and the Kennedy assassination." Bush writes him back and says, nothing I can do about it. And then DeMornshall ends up dead. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting. And there's two official conclusions that the government reached. There's the Warren Committee that says Oswald did it himself, 3 shots, and then there's the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which is when Congress was looking at the CIA and the family jewels and the assassinations of the 60s, and they ruled that there was probably a conspiracy. So there's actually 2 official government conclusions. Which one do you believe, right?
Yeah. Probably both are wrong. But yeah, you brought up earlier chaos, and we were talking earlier that I thought this was an interesting connection and kind of leads into what I kind of want to get into next. How these things, evolve over time and sort of adapt. Now, if you read Chaos, I think he kind of just lays out the evidence and the stuff that he's found out, and he never really makes any strong conclusions. He more leaves it to you, to the reader, to kind of piece it together. But the way I saw it is it basically sounded like what he was explaining was like MK Ultra, but like adapted to a newer age, is what was occurring there. With Manson, he clearly was a crazy person. Now they may have hyped it up, with drugs or, messing them. He was in some weird program in prison at some time and had some sort of handler type who coincidentally later became his parole officer, which is weird how those two things ran into each other.
Yeah, kept him out of prison so many times.
Yep. And then he ended up getting his whole harem of women and like kind of his like little mini cult, and like that he would always have them on drugs and kind of making suggestions. And then lo and behold, there seems to be some weird other stuff going on. I don't know what. It definitely was an aspect of infiltrating Hollywood, maybe some other aspect of other stuff, because he was chummy with a lot of those big wigs. Seemed to be like he was the kind of guy that got them drugs and stuff. But I do think it's like that was a good example of how, like, say something changes over time. You take MK Ultra, they adapted to more like the hippie age. They kind of worked off that. And I think we may very well be experiencing, or soon to experience, some sort of similar thing of like expanding upon that, multiple other things, putting them together. I do think, and a lot of people might think it's crazy. It's actually funny. My buddy Clint Russell, on one of his most recent episodes, it was like a solo one, I forget what it was called. He was talking about it, and I don't know if this was like, I'm not saying he got it from me or I got it from him or whatever. This is something we've definitely talked about in group chats. I'm sure he's probably got it from other places as well. But like, as weird as this may sound, and I probably got a little hate from this, the Eliza Blue thing is what really kind of ticked my interest, or was kind of like, what is going on here? And I don't mean Eliza Blue particularly. It's like, I don't really, like, don't get me wrong. If anyone wants my position, because a lot of people like accused us of being like pro Eliza or whatever, like they kind of dismiss the bad shit, because I do think she probably likely had some part in getting accounts taken down. Whether I don't know to what degree. She also did threaten legal action online. Those seem shitty to me. But this thing devolved in this weird pylon thing, and people started digging into her past, and then this, and then that, and it just seems so inorganic to me. And then once I kind of step back and look at the bigger picture and seeing the fallout of this, and then also other things, you had like the Crowder versus Shapiro thing not too long ago. There's also this weird shit going on in the Blaze. It's almost like alt media is having these weird fractures, and it all seems inorganic. And we're noticing, like, one thing, Clint pointed out his thing was that there's like, particularly with the Ukraine thing, you see a lot of Ukraine bots. But then even with this Eliza thing, there seemed to be like a weird amount of bots that came out. Once again, I'm saying, like, I think she did some stuff that was worthy of derision. I do. But then this weird pylon where people were crazy, and if you didn't like immediately come out and condemn, I don't know. It's just this digging into her past and all this other weird stuff that expanded out from it. People started attacking like Tim Pool and his like staff, and it just got really weird, and it seemed inorganic, and it blew up. And I'm not saying there aren't real actors that were upset, but it's like, it just felt like some sort of weird op with all the bots and this, and then people getting stirred up. They're kind of playing off this drama cycle, hyping it up, and it's causing weird fractions. I've seen people getting doxxed. I've seen people getting weird threats, people putting up people's, stuff that's like kind of like almost like I guess blackmail would be the wrong word, since they're not actually blackmailing it. They're just putting it out there. It's like sensitive information about people, kind of trashing each other. And it's like, if you look at it, it's like, if that's an op, I mean, I'm not saying it's necessarily not, but if it was, would it look any? If it wasn't, would it look any different? Like it's like you're literally doing all their work for them, putting out all the information they can blackmail people with. They're causing fractures. They're doing this. They're doing that. It's just I don't know. I see that and I'm like, oh, and even if it's not, it does kind of make me think, like, okay, this is probably how they'll do it in the future, if not already. They start fucking like these type of dragging people online, whipping up crowds. Because one thing in part 3 of Shane Cashman's one, a lot of people are upset by the article. I actually thought it was a great article. And
I read part 1. Yeah,
yeah,
I was going to read 2 and 3,
yeah,
but they're taken down
yeah.
off Timcast website.
Part 1's the only one I didn't read. I read part 2 and part 3.
Oh.
I assume part 1 was probably just like a generic, oh, let me tell you about Eliza and her life. And I was just kind of like, I want to get to like from the beginning. I knew there was more to the story, and I know Shane's the kind of guy that's going to want to go into the stuff like the more, because I didn't really ever give a shit about her past. I just didn't. Like I don't know, like whether she was a hooker or she was trafficked or whatever. I couldn't care less. Like I don't know. That wasn't relevant information to me.
Well, I mean, you hope she wasn't trafficked. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not, I know, I get what you're saying. You're not
Yeah.
saying like, oh,
Well,
you
because
don't,
that was the
you're
big thing is
insensitive.
people were implying she made up her whole story.
Right.
People were pointing out holes in timelines. In the last thing he made a point about this character called like a gang stalker, which is like this is kind of what they do. They whip up frenzies. They will create bots. They will create fake pages. He was even alluding to, because that was one of the biggest things I thought was gross, was this drama cycle. All these people covering this, covering that. Oh, did she suck the guy's dick in 2006? This, that. Like, it was just insane. And then people were trying to like kind of almost do this. It's like the Always Sunny in Philadelphia thing where he has like the board. They were almost doing that, but with her like life story. And you're like,
yeah,
they're trying to
that's
piece
twisted.
yeah, they're piecing together all this evidence, and most of the evidence was like weak at best. But they're also doing it on the fly, and then like using some weak evidence to uphold their next evidence. And apparently, one of the things he was getting, I don't know the truth of this, but this is totally something that they could do. And then say like a Fed or an op, or even just if it is just someone just trying to stir up shit that's not Fed related whatsoever. They 100%, like he was implying that one of the things they were doing is they would make up like fake pages that would make salacious claims. And if you actually did any research whatsoever, you could be like, why was this website just made yesterday, or something like that? And then people run with it, and then it's kind of this news cycle to when you can't beat it back, and it's like it just gets out of control, and you can't keep up with it. It's just this crazy pylon that just spirals. And to me, I was like looking from like a bird's eye, like bigger, larger view. I'm like, I mean, even if this isn't a Fed hop, this is like a perfect opportunity for Feds to be like, yeah, we should fucking do this.
Let's take some notes on how to do this shit now. Yeah, no, man, totally. And I talked to Eric about this a lot of the times, even when we're not podcasting. Like, if they had that shit going on in the 50s and 60s with MK Ultra and infiltrating mental hospitals, college universities, businesses, organizations, groups, activist groups, protest groups, what the hell do they have going on now? And what I really think it is they're manipulating the technology and social media, like you're saying, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And I think really where they have the most power is through the television, through the TV screen.
Mm-hmm.
They like, you almost don't even need to. You can just have people believing that the feds are involved when it's all just them running around chasing their tail, making shit up. Um, looking at bad information and not even really knowing what the truth is or what's good information or bad information. And it gets to a point where you can't suss it out, and you just kind of throw your hands up and it's on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's how they're able to memory hole so much now, man. I mean, try to look for something online, from a news article or something I researched 15, 20 years ago, and you can't even find it now. So it's like, Jesus, did it really exist? Like,
Yeah.
and they have everybody so distracted and so caught up in the minutia that the big picture shit just kind of skates kind of right under the radar. I mean, this stuff with Palestine, Ohio, with the chemical spill, man. I mean, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
How
I don't know
that's
what to make of that. Yeah.
how
I
a lot
mean,
of the environmentalists are like, Greta's not on it, and where's Al Gore? Is he like, what's going on with that? So yeah, I don't know a lot about the Eliza Blue. I've just heard about it peripherally. Obviously, Eric's on Twitter, and the Timcast. I think that Eliza was on Timcast at one point, and
Yeah, she's on twice, I think. But I mean, once again, I don't even like. I never even cared about the Liza Blue aspect of it. I just remember from the I guess not from the beginning, but once it started spiraling, I was just like, this is weird. And if anything, that's what caught my eye. Like, something about this is odd. Like, it's just spiraling, and then just I
yeah,
don't know, like looking at it from other
well,
angles. And you mean, don't get me wrong, and that's I think the what made this compelling for the drama cycle is that there were legitimate grievances in the
mhm.
mix, and that but then they just it and spiraled out from there. So
It got
that's
lost in the shuffle.
yes. So it's kind of like I said on Timcast, I actually talked about, it's like I think it's the idea is you got to keep your eye on the ball. And it's like that's almost
Yeah,
like if this was a Fed trick, or if it wasn't, it was almost like they perfectly, like if you ever watch like soccer and see someone do like some crazy like trick where they try to fake
head
you out.
fake. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like if you had just looked at the ball, you would have been fine. Like the ball being what is the actual pertinent information that we really need to focus on here. But then
Well,
you got this other flare going on over here.
Well, that's the whole thing about Elon Musk, right? Like, look, if he was, so he takes over Twitter, and if one of the initiatives that he's doing, and he's actually doing this, is taking down those accounts that had CP and that were promoting child trafficking, that's a good thing. I think every good person, sane, rational person, can agree with that. Um, Now, if he takes over Twitter and he has something else in mind, which I mean, obviously he's not it's not just a benevolent thing for him. He has an agenda. He has his aims and his goals and what he wants to do with it. Nobody receives more government money and funding than Elon Musk. The Starlink stuff is pretty nefarious overall. The AI initiatives that he wants to do, I think, are very dystopic and frightening. So I don't necessarily trust him, but that's not to say that what he's done with Twitter, there's some good to come out of it. I mean, Ryan Dawson got his account back, Reed's back on there. Twitter's been noticeably more based, from what I understand. I mean, I look at it. I'm not on there, but I obviously stuff comes up that's like Twitter from Twitter. So it looks like more people are able to speak their minds and say stuff that you couldn't say 2 years ago on there. So I think that's a good thing. So you got to point out the positives, but is there fuckery going on and going to be going on? Of course,
Yeah,
of course.
especially with the with the deep fakes and stuff like that coming out. I do think people need to really have their guard up and try to be rational. Because that's why this particular one, I think a lot of people lost their rationality because they had that one bit of something. They're like, oh, this is legit, and then that in their head justified the spiral that they went down on after. So it's just
Yeah.
like, which yeah, I mean, I don't get me wrong. I think if she had any part in those accounts, and and I also think it was really gross that she on Twitter was threatening legal action for people sharing a public video that was
Mm.
still up other places. I mean,
Yeah, that's
the,
strange.
the claim is kind of that she was trafficked at that time, so I guess in a certain sense that wasn't consensual. And okay, there's an interesting theory argument to be had there, but at the very least, I don't think there's any culpability for people sharing it that aren't aware of that aspect, and they thought it was completely just a consensual video that she was sharing around. If anything, her grievance is the person with the original video at that point. So, like, yes, that was fucked up. But, okay, like, but all the other craziness, like, what the fuck is going on here? It just got wild. But I'm not trying to make this a drama stream at all. That's why I try to keep making the point that I'm focused on the other aspects of the
The
using
bigger
proper
implication,
logic. Yeah, the
you know,
larger picture, the implications, what it could mean.
fracturing of, yeah, I mean, yeah, like you're saying, man, like alt media being fractured, right?
Yeah,
And going at each other's throats and getting these people canceled and banned and taken off. And yeah, it's an effective tactic. Definitely an effective tactic. And um, yeah, you take your eye off the ball and you get caught in the weeds.
yeah,
You can see how that happens very
yeah.
easily.
Which is a common thing in our conspiracy things. There's a lot of kooks out there, and
Yeah,
I have love for some of the kooks, but at the same time, it's like you also like it does. There definitely is some effect where it can detract from the actual important story if you're putting out kookery out there. I mean, it's one
yeah,
of those things like I mean, I don't know. People don't always mean to, but I think you should try your best to sort of be rational and at least make some sort of I don't know, effort to not put out bunk information if you can. I mean, I know people
Hey,
have fun with it, but
I've made mistakes, man. We've all made mistakes, or we believe something that we later found out wasn't true. And I mean, that's called part of being a human being. And I always try to acknowledge that and correct myself because I want to always put out and promote the best information. And, like tonight, we're just having a loose chat. We could maybe speculate a little bit on some things, but I try not to speculate a lot of the time when talking about this stuff. And one of the big memes and stories, even since Trump was in there in 2017, he was going to be the president to release all the files. And there's so much hype about that. Like, oh, is there going to be a smoking gun? There's people saying, no, there's not going to be a smoking gun. But what people need to understand about the release of the files, and there's still tons of files that haven't been released, by the way. We're talking whole entire sections completely blacked out, specifically about, CIA agents like James Angleton. Um, Oh, Angleton, that's the agent I was thinking about who was funding that group down there, the student group that released all that information about Oswald. That was directly being funded by Angleton, who's a legendary CIA officer who was convinced there was a Russian mole and he was hunting the mole, and he went by the nickname Mother. I mean, he was legendary. There's a whole part about him completely redacted. There's a whole part about William Harvey, who had open hatred and disdain for JFK and RFK, and his widow was interviewed by a JFK researcher, and she was like, yeah, he hated them, and she said all kinds of really inflammatory stuff. All of his stuff is all redacted. Oswald's tax records. I mean, if it was just Oswald and he was the only one that acted, why should there be anything redacted? There's no CIA agents around today, as far as I know, that were active duty in 1963 that are going to be compromised. Or I mean, they say, oh, methods, we can't release it because of methods or whatever, or it might endanger an ally, which it's all bullshit, man. It's all about,
methods. You'll catch on to the next one.
yeah, it's all about them not embarrassing themselves. But my bigger point is that no, I don't think there's going to be a smoking gun, but there's pieces that are released. Um, After the film JFK came out, there Congress passed a law, the JFK records law in '92, when H.W. Bush was president, and it said by the year 2017 we will release all the files. 2017 comes, Trump's in there, he tweets, at long last we're going to release all the files. I'm so excited, because the king loves a good conspiracy. I mean, he's talked about Ted Cruz's father being involved with Oswald, and there's interesting stuff about Ted Cruz's father to suggest that he may have been some kind of spook. He took some weird trips to Canada, which is where Ted Cruz was born. That's a whole nother angle of it. But over time, there's little bits that get released, or there's another passage from a document that was previously blacked out that once it gets released, it puts into better context what we already saw. So, like, for example, one really big piece of that was the fact that since the mayor of Dallas, Earl Cabell, his brother was the deputy director of the CIA, Charles Cabell, and Earl had been a CIA asset since 1956. And at the time of the assassination, he was the friggin' mayor of Dallas. So that was a huge thing that nobody knew about for years, and that got released. And that thread has sent researchers into a whole bunch of other stuff. So one researcher who's done really great work on this is Jefferson Morley. He used to be a writer for the Washington Post. John Newman has done invaluable work. He has a book called Oswald and the CIA that came out in like the 90s, and it goes into all that stuff. So it's labor intensive, and there's a lot of small information that might not. It's like a piece of a puzzle. It might seem insignificant at the time, but when it's brought in onto the table and the dots are connected, it shows a larger picture. So that's why I think the documents are important, and there's a clear reason why they are still withholding so many of them.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like a lot of these documents got released for the OKC stuff from Jesse Trinity from his tireless fight against them, and it is like I'd say it's probably fair to say there are no smoking guns in OKC, but what I mean by that is like no smoking guns into what you can tell exactly what happened or who exactly is responsible, but you get enough documents, enough information comes out, and you paint a picture. If anyone who actually, honestly goes down this rabbit hole and looks at it, you can kind of reasonably be like, I think I have a good idea what happened here. And yeah, you may never be something that like technically upholds in court and somebody you can get, but there is stuff like John Doe 2, Terrence Yeakey, where it's like, Yeah, okay. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's definitely a smoking gun in my head for Terrence Yeeki didn't kill himself. But now, what does that then? What can you extrapolate from that? Who
Right.
knows?
Why was he
Yeah,
killed? Like, so
yeah,
he was literally the first responder to respond and saved several people, but has a totally different. He witnessed something totally counter to the official story, right? And he
yeah.
was
He
going to
made
talk about it, or he was talking about it, or what was the?
he said something to his ex-wife about that it's not what they're telling you. You. I believe that was almost exact quote. I might have got that right. And other stuff. He never said explicitly because I think he was trying to protect his ex-wife. The mother of his children. He also said something very similar in a letter to a friend, and there might have been other sources. But he's definitely was. He also was getting in fights at work. Them about specific stuff. I highly check people if they, if you just want to find out about Yiki, check out part 7 of my series. It's in that. There's also, if you look in the video description, there's a great article, probably the best article there is on that, where you can check that out. But
I got to revisit that. Yeah, I will
yeah.
definitely look at that again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the article has a lot in it, and it's all well sourced, really good stuff. But yeah, no, I do think there is something too that like when these things start adding up, and it is a bummer that you may never get that smoking gun to where you're like, oh yep, McVeigh totally was an asset, and the federal government needs to be held to account for this, and they need to put this guy in jail. You may never see that, but at the very least you can get an idea to where you're like, this is what happened, or a
Yeah.
good idea of what happened, and I think that's important. But
I think
I think
it's the same with the
what?
Kennedy assassination, man. It
Yep.
really is. If you really any aspect of it, man, you start to really just look at it and peel the layers, the whole story collapses. The whole official story just collapses under its own ridiculous weight.
Well, all right, Mike, this has been a fun time. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. If you want to go ahead and drop your plugs, let us know what you're doing and what big interviews you got coming up, anything like that. Let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks, Jose. It's been a blast,
Mhm.
man. I appreciate you having me
Thanks,
on,
Seth.
and we'll have to do it again soon. Yeah, you can follow us at Jackman Radio. We're on patreon.com/Jackman Radio. We're on YouTube, we're still on there. We've had a couple of videos taken down, but we haven't been taken down. Knock on wood. But yeah, we're on all the major podcatchers like Jose. We're on Patreon, Spotify, iTunes. I think Apple. And tomorrow we are releasing a interview with Irish singing sensation Gilbert O'Sullivan. He's one of my favorite singers from the 70s. Folks, you may know him from the song Alone Again Naturally, which is his most famous song. He was nominated for a Grammy in the early 70s for that song. It's been featured in a bunch of films and TV shows. So that will be dropping tomorrow night. Look for it on our social media and on our YouTube at 8 o'clock, which is the 17th. So by the time this comes out, it will have already come out. So
Mm.
you can see that. And I'm also working on having Nick Bryant, a researcher and author and journalist that I respect very deeply, who has done some of the best work on the DC Madam as well as the Franklin scandal. And we're hoping to have him on in the coming weeks. So keep an eye out for that.
Hell yeah, I'll definitely have to check that one out. You told me about the Franklin scandal in the beginning. It was interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll deep dive that sometime, Jose. It's
yeah,
dark. It's real.
for sure.
That's the real Pizzagate. That's
Yeah.
the real Pizzagate.
Eddie Grimm said, "Can't tell Fed or woman." I'm assuming you're referring to Eliza Blue. I read part 2 and part 3. He read part 1. I mean, my gut feeling from what I read, kind of going to her life, I think she's just a woman. I mean, maybe she's a Fed. I don't know if she's a Fed. She got her story together fairly well, at least in the article. So I don't know. My gut feeling is a woman. If there is any sort of Fed involvement, or even if an op that's not Fed related, just someone just trying to wreak havoc, whatever, I think it was likely someone just latched onto the situation, saw a golden opportunity. That'd be my opinion. I don't know. That's just my guess. If I'm gonna, speculate here, she could be a Fed. Who knows? But with that, this is a No Way Jose show. Find me on YouTube, all major odd podcasters, Odyssey as well. Follow me on Twitter at Tower Gang. Tower Gang Jose. Fucking had a brain fart there. Yeah, if you want to support me, patreon.com, Snowy Jose 2020. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. With that, we are out. Thank you for your time, Mike. This is fun.
Thank you.
We're out.